Well, hello and good morning, everybody. Welcome to another Cars and Coffee with me, Kenny Brown, actually. And we've got some things we need to talk about this morning. You probably haven't seen me for the last couple weeks, so we'll be talking about that here pretty soon. But I'd like to welcome you. I hope I can answer some of your questions. And we've got some great questions that came in from the Speed Therapy Society this week. And I hope that you want to send in some more questions because when we get towards the end, I will be answering some of your questions live along with the questions that came in through the Speed Therapy Society. If you're not a Speed Therapy Society member, I'd like you to join. There's a lot of cool things go on, a lot of interaction between our society members. Lots of things to talk about. Okay, so something looks different today, if you hadn't noticed. Well, the reason I haven't been here for the past 2 weeks, there's two main reasons. Number one, we moved. We relocated a few doors down, which gives us some more space that we really need. But it also has this room that I think we're going to kind of turn into a studio. I haven't figured out how we're going to do that yet. This is sort of a work in progress, but I think as the weeks go on, we'll figure out how to turn this into a studio, which is pretty cool. The other thing is because we've got more space here, I think in the future we may open up to, if car clubs are coming through town on a Saturday morning, you may be able to come in and sit and watch the show. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, let's see. We've got we're going to be talking about some IRS 99 to 04 Cobra on a couple of different subjects. We're going to talk about the Speed Therapy Academy, registering for the Speed Therapy Academy again. And IRS Rear Steer Kit, we had a question on that. And we've got some other interesting questions from the Speed Therapy Society. So let's see. I'm already on the second page. So let me start out because we've been moving. Carrie's been out for a little bit. We've just kind of had to throw today together. So, but we've got some good questions, and I would come up with some good information for you. So I think what we're going to do is we'll just go to questions because that's what we have mostly of this morning, and the questions actually lead into the show and tell for the day. So Henry DeSantos has a good question. He says, can you give me a good overview of wheel and tire fitments that you use in the S197 Mustangs? Okay, as far as wheels, I break the wheels into three categories. 18-inch wheels are for racing because most of the race tires are 18-inch and most of the sanctioning bodies require 18-inch. So 18 inches for racing. 19-inch wheels are for street performance and track days. And I look at 20-inch wheels as for show. I'm not a big fan of running 20-inch wheels on track. There's a lot of unsprung mass. And also the sidewall on the tires gets pretty short. And we really need, for the weight of a Mustang, you need some sidewall. So that's the wheel size. Now, if somebody's running, like we'll drop the race stuff off because that's a whole different subject. But as far as street performance and track, if somebody wants to run like a square setup, then my recommendation is 19 by 10 all four corners with 285/35 19s. 285/35 is a nice tall tire, and it works really great. It puts a lot of tire on the ground, and if you're running the square setup, then if you want, you can like rotate your tires. So that's what we run for a square setup. Now, mostly on the S197s, the package that we run is a 1910 front and 1911 rear, because a lot of cars we do are Coyotes or GT500s, and they've got a little bit of snort to them, so they got extra power. So in that case, I'll either run 285/35 on the front and 305/30 on the back. Depending on the car and the application, maybe I use a 295/30 on the front and 305 on the back. Now, for like high horsepower applications, we could get into some, depending on the tires, we could get into some 315s over the 305s if somebody's like a GT500 with a lot of horsepower. But basically, my normal setup is a 285/35 on the front, 19 by 10, 305/30 on the back, and 19 by 11. And that seems to be, there's lots of room, everything works, and the cars perform really well. Sometimes if somebody isn't running a lot of power, for the 285 to 305. What I might do is play with the rear spring rates a little bit to improve front tire wear, because that's always putting a lot of weight on the front tires. So anyway, that's kind of like my recommendation for tires. And if anybody has any other questions, again, you can sign up for the 15-minute consults, and I can talk through what your application is, what type of tires you're wanting to use, and I can give you more information for your application. Okay, now here's the next one. Now, for some reason, the names didn't come through on the rest of these, so I'll just have to say a Cars and Coffee viewer says, I have a full IRS swap in my SN95 Mustang. I want to use let's see, I want to use your subframe to start building on and upgrading all the components, but it's only advertised to work on a 99 to 04 new edge. Can you confirm this will bolt into a 94 to 98? Absolutely. The only reason we advertised for 99 to 04 because that's what the IRS came in, was 99 to 04 Cobras. You can put the IRS in any of the SN95 cars from like 94 all the way up. The other thing, we have a lot of customers right now who are actually putting the IRS into Fox cars. And because we had so many people that want to put the IRS in Fox, we actually changed the template on the back of our hard mount. When we do the full geometry upgrade on the IRS carrier, we whack up that great big ugly hunk of mount in the back and throw it away. And instead we put a bracket on there that bolts straight to the frame rail, which means we hard mount the carrier to the frame rail. And it had the holes in there for an SN95, but we've had so many people with Foxes that we added a couple extra holes, an elongated one, so that it'd be an easy bolt up for most of the Fox cars. Okay, because you get back in the early years and there's a lot of strange things that go on, but we've got the IRS package that will bolt up to most of the Fox cars. And if it doesn't bolt directly, it shouldn't take very much to get it to bolt on. So, I mean, getting back to your question, absolutely. I mean, you can easily bolt that onto a 95 without any problem at all. And of course, we have all the bits and pieces, and we're going to talk about some of those bits and pieces here in just a minute. Okay, here's another question from another Speed Therapy Society or Cars and Coffee viewer. And it says, do you need to upgrade the water pump when you change to a triple pass design? Now, I mean, we have two triple passes. We got a triple pass radiator, and we have a triple pass intercooler for the GT500s. In either case, I don't see a necessity. I mean, we've never had, for the radiators, we've never ever had to upgrade water pumps. The radiator just makes it more efficient. I mean, the same amount of water flows to the radiator, and it just goes across the radiator 3 times rather than diagonally once. So we get full coverage to the radiator and cool a lot better. I mean, we've had a customer with a GT 350 up at Road America, took almost 30 degrees of water temperature out of his car. We've had other people, put them in, and even down in Texas, where it's hot, not see a huge rise in oil temperature that we're seeing. So really, you don't need to change the water pump. You just need to drop the radiator in. If it's for the intercooler, for the supercharger, again, I don't see the need for changing it because you're still same amount of water is flowing through the radiator. So I really don't see the need for upgrading the water pump. Let's see now. This is an IRS question we're going to get to in the end because that's going to lead into show and tell this week. Let's see. I've got this. This is a question that's come up a couple times. I've got a 2007 Mustang GT, and I bought some Ford Performance camshafts. I'm assuming those are the hot rod cams for the 3 valves. I was wondering how much it would cost to get them installed, and do I need other parts? Okay, here's the thing. Now, if you scour the internet, there's like the information is all over the board on what happens if you install just the camshafts. I really, doing just the camshafts, I don't see you getting a lot of gain. It's going to sound really cool. It's going to get that lope, but as far as power, I don't think you're going to pick up much more than maybe 15 horsepower. Although if you read the advertisements, it says more. I think Ford says that with the cams, intake manifold, and headers, you pick up 30 horsepower. If you have the CNC heads, that picks up 50 horsepower. So what I'm getting to is when you do an upgrade in camshaft, you've got to kind of bring everybody to the party. You really need to make some other improvements to the airflow, because I mean, internal combustion engine is nothing more than an air pump. You know, air comes in, gets compressed, and goes out. So there's nothing more than pump air. Of course, there's an explosion in the middle that helps the air go out the other side. But if you're bringing air in and pushing air out, if you change one thing, like just the camshaft, then you're not really going to take full advantage of the profile that's in the camshaft and the increase in cam profile. What you really need to make those cams work is at least the CNC heads. You know, my recommendation, we did a while back, we took on Cliff's FR500S. It was 2008 FR500S. We upgraded it to 2011 World Challenge engine specs. In 2000, and if you may think back in 2009 and 10, the Mustang Challenge ran with the FR500S cars. In fact, I engineered 3 of those cars for the Mustang Challenge series. But the series ended in 2010, so there was no place for the cars to go. So the SCCA made provisions for the FR500S in the 2011 World Challenge with some upgrades to improve the performance, because they had to run against some pretty hot cars, including the Boss S Mustangs. One of those upgrades was my suspension, my AGS 4.0 suspension, which we did the Cliffs. Actually, we did 4.5, which is the next level up. But what we did for the engine, we did the full, just to kind of keep it in the same vein as what the 2011 spec would be. We did the hot rod cams, we did the CNC heads, we did the improved intake manifold, bigger throttle body, and log tube headers. And I got the Ford CNC heads are no longer available, so I went to my friends at Livernois, and they've got, for the 3 valves, they've got stage 1, 2, and 3. All of them are just excellent cylinder heads. If you're looking for a good CNC head, look no further than Livernois. What I chose was the stage 2. Stage 1 was more of a street application. Stage 3 was sort of like full race. So this was just a track day car. So we just went with stage 2, which was a little better than the original Ford CNC heads, which would be equivalent to stage 1. And we got that. We put it on the dyno and got a tune. And what we did, we came up with, and here's the dyno. It's hard to see, reflection of light. You can't see it there. What we came up with, we ended up with 380 horsepower and 340 pounds of torque. Now, if you do the math on 380 horsepower, you know, add the losses back in, you come up somewhere around 440 for horsepower, which would put you right in the same ballpark as a Coyote motor. Like the Boss motor, I think, was 444. So, I mean, that whole combination, stage 2 heads, the hot rod cams, the Ford Racing intake manifold, throttle body, and long tube headers, of course, cold air kit, and a tune. You know, we took it from, 300 horsepower up to, like close to 440, which is a pretty big improvement. So getting back to your original question is, we wouldn't do just camshafts. To me, that's a lot of money for not a lot of gain to swap the camshafts out. I mean, you might find somebody that would. I'd strongly recommend you start thinking about adding to the camshafts to make it work better. And CNC heads, no less. You should have no less than long tube headers, the Ford intake manifold, and cold air and a tune. I think that's what you need to make the cams work. So I hope that's a good answer for you. If you want to know more, again, you can always sign up for one of my 15-minute consults, and we can kind of talk through your different options on how you can set that car up for good performance. Okay, now we have This is kind of takes me into my Wayback Machine. So I have a 99 Cobra. Word is you have the best IRS springs around. How can I order some? Okay, what I'm guessing is like back when we did a lot of Cobras, before I took time off for health, we actually had our own springs made for the, we couldn't find anything that was any good for the 03, 04 Cobras. With the Terminator motor that had a lot of weight in the front, that had a lot of power. So we actually went to one of our suppliers and had springs made to my specifications. Well, a long time has passed since then, and we really haven't, because we moved, kind of like beyond that, we haven't really gone back and produced those. But as luck would have it, one of our spring suppliers does have a couple of springs that are pretty close to what we used to have. Now, they've got the one they've got that's the closest to what we used to do for the GT5 or for the GT500s for the Cobra Terminators are like maybe 10 or 20 pounds more than my original springs, and the front variable actually adds to that, which is for a supercharged car with all the extra weight is what I would go with. But you've got a 99. They don't have nearly as much front weight. Fortunately, there's another spring package that's actually a little bit more aggressive than as far as front spring rate than what we used like in the GTs. But it's pretty close to what we're using now, and those are available. And they lower, either one of these lower, well, on the GT500 for the Cobra Terminators, it lowers the car about 1.5 inches roughly, depending on equipment. And for the other springs, the 59 springs, they lower the car about the same, about 1.5 inches. And it's a really great spring package. They are $529, and we can certainly get them for you. I would recommend, unless you're on the racetrack, I'd recommend sticking with the lower rate springs, just because the plain 99 Cobra is a lot lighter than an 03, 04 Cobra. So that's kind of like my recommendations. Now, which brings me to another point. Anytime you increase spring rates, you absolutely, positively have to improve your shocks. You have to go to a performance shock. Because if you don't, then the springs are going to overwhelm the factory shock, and it's going to be terrible. You're going to get bad ride quality. The shocks are going to go away really fast. So anytime you increase spring rate, you need to increase shock rate, specifically rebound, because that's the big thing you need when you go increase on spring rate. Because what happens, like you're going around a corner and the spring, will compress. Well, what happens if you compress a spring and you stop compressing it is, it kind of sprawls out. Well, the whole idea of rebound is to control how quickly or slowly that spring becomes unwound or uncompressed. And that's why we use a lot of rebound adjustment when we're tuning cars at the track. So I'd recommend at the very least, like some Coney Yellow Sports. That's the single adjustable, and that will be more than enough shock to handle the springs. And I think you'd be pretty happy and impressed with just how well the car rode and handled. So anytime you anytime you increase spring rate, you have to increase shocks. And going back, this is going back in a Wayback Machine again. We were working on Fox cars a long time ago. We had an aftermarket. We used to get our the basic spring package we used from Ford Racing, but they stopped making them, so I had to go to another manufacturer, have them make them for me. But it was a pretty good increase in spring rate. But we always used, back then it was mostly Coney Reds. You can't get the Coney Reds anymore, so now it's all Coney Yellows. But we always put them, the springs and shocks together, and they work great. We had so many people would call me and say that, well, if you increase spring rate, you're going to get a really harsh ride quality. And that's not the case. The ride quality, springs just support the car. Ride quality comes from the shock valving. And where that was coming from is people back then would just throw a set of performance springs on with stock shocks. And there was way more spring than the shock could handle. And the net result is a really bad ride quality, really harsh, choppy ride quality. So you get the right shocks with increased spring rate, and it's going to be fine. You try to put increased spring rate with stock shocks, especially in the older cars, and you're not going to get a good outcome. So just remember, springs hold the car up, shocks control the ride quality. So yeah, let us know if we can get you set up with those springs. I think you'd be happy with them, and also we can get the Koni shocks for you if you want. I strongly recommend performance shocks to go with any increase in spring rate. Here's a question I'm not really sure. I'm just going to have to make some guesses here from Greg. For a S197 GT500, what will you recommend for a street setup that would allow adjustment to make adjustment but make the factory ride height available? I'm guessing you're talking about spring and shock packages. It's kind of a tough question to answer because most aftermarket performance spring and shock packages will lower the cars at least an inch. Even the ones that are ride height adjustable, typically will bring the car down about an inch. So, I mean, we've got some really great coilover packages for the GT500s. But it's, getting back to the factory ride height, I mean, we could probably do that with some, with our strange package, because I could actually use a longer spring on that. But you're not going to get as much. You're not going to be able to lower the car as much as normal. So it's kind of like a catch-22. I mean, the performance springs and shocks are going to lower the car about an inch. Adding that inch back up. I think the strange might be the only ones that would have enough adjustment on the coilovers to get that 1 inch back. But again, this sounds like a 15-minute consult question, and I'm sure that Brad or Carrie can put up a link so you can sign up for 15-minute consult. We can kind of talk through, and so I can get a little better idea exactly what you're looking for, how you're using the car. Because I mean, I don't have like here, take my spring and shock package. It's a performance package. That's not the way it works here. I mean, you need to talk to me, and we figure out what you need, what kind of spring rate you need, and then I customize a package for you. And anybody that sells you springs without any indication what the spring rates are, how do you know what you're getting? So you really need to know what your spring rate is. And for me to give you the right spring rate, I need to know a lot about the car. How are you using it? What tires? How much power? That sort of thing. And then I can figure out spring rates. But any of the packages we have will probably lower the car at least an inch, some more. But I think this Strange might be the only one that we could set it so we can add a little more back to it as far as height. So, okay, now this kind of like brings. Remember, you can send questions. If you have any questions, send them in. We'll get to them in a little bit. This is kind of like because we've been so discombobulated around here over the last couple of weeks. This is kind of like not a normal Cars and Coffee because they really haven't had a whole bunch of time to prepare. As you can tell, this is a little bit different room. And this is one of the spare rooms in the new space we moved into. And it actually used to be a conference room. We thought, this might work pretty good for my little studio. So that's what for you missed earlier in the show. I'm Kenny Brown, this is Cars and Coffee, and this is kind of like our new space. A few weeks back, we moved from actually just same building, just a few doors down in a much larger space. And this was a spare room that we didn't need. So we thought, it looks like a great room for a studio. So it's a work in progress. We need to work with it a little more, figure out better lighting and things. But and I think it has real potential. And like I said earlier, once we sort of get this set up, if you've got a car club or something coming through Indianapolis, there's a chance in the future that you could come and watch the show because there's enough room to have people. So that's keep that in mind too. So let's get to our last question, which Brad, you said we had another question come in at the last minute.
Yes, we do. I just posted it on the screen. What are the advantages of having a coilover in the rear instead of the coil separated from the shock? And that's from Marcus White, who's a Speed Therapy Academy alumni member.
Okay, there's a lot of differences. One, having the coil on the shock You have a lot more range of ride height. You can adjust the ride height up and down. But the biggest advantage is spring rates. When you've got springs that go on the control arm, or like stock replacement springs, your spring rates are pretty limited, and most of them are, like not really enough spring to make the car work really well. So the biggest advantage is spring rate, because like I said before, I mean, I can pick the spring rate that I think you're going to need, and with the coilover, I pick it up. If it's somebody starting out on track, I'm going to come up with a softer spring rate than somebody that's advanced, because the more spring you put into the Mustang, the better it turns and the faster it goes. But in the same token, the more spring you put in, like your window for error, your error window starts shrinking down. So I don't like putting inexperienced people on high rate springs, because it's like, you don't have enough, experience to react. Although if you get like one of our full suspensions, it makes it easy. It makes the car a lot more predictable, and you don't have to worry about as much about that. But I mean, the big thing is spring rate. I mean, I can pick the spring rate that I want, and if you change the application, it's maybe a half an hour job to take one spring off, drop another one on, poof, made the spring rate go higher or lower. So the big advantage to me is spring rate, being able to choose your spring rate, along with adjustability. Now, I've seen some aftermarket lower control arms that actually have some adjustability, but you're still stuck with whatever springs come off the shelf. And I can tell you that I've got pages and pages of different spring rates from different spring companies, and anything that comes off the shelf is not what I would call true performance springs. They're mostly lowering springs, and the lowering springs don't have much increase in rate. And there are like some touring springs. That's what most of them are out there. To give you an idea, just roughly idea, like start that's 197. Front spring rate is in the 140, 150 range. Front spring rate. Anything you can get off the shelf only gets you up to 200, maybe 220. Unless you get some of our springs from one of our suppliers, then we can go up a little bit higher. Nevertheless, but for our touring package is a 350 front. Street performance is 400. Novice to intermediate track is 500, 550, and advanced track is 650. And do you think that sounds like a lot? Then for my late son Paul's World Challenge Mustang, on Pirelli slicks, we would run between 850 and 950 on front spring rate. So you can see the more spring you put into a car, the faster it goes, but you better be able to drive it. I think anybody that tried to put like an 850 spring package into a track day car could very easily get themselves in trouble. And the other thing too is that those 850s and 950s were for Pirelli slicks. Anytime you're running a slick tire, you have to go way up on spring rate. I see so many people show up for track days and they pick up some used slicks off the internet, and they think it's really going to make them go faster. And I mean, that is so wrong-headed. The stickier the tire, the more spring you need, plain and simple. The reason is when a car's going around the corner, it rolls. You've got what's called a slip angle on the tire. And those who have been through the Speed Therapy Academy know all about this, because we went through it in great depth. But you've got slip angle, and the car stops rolling because the tire doesn't grip anymore. You put a sticky tire on there like a slick, and you're going around that same corner, and there's no slip angle. I mean, the tire just sticks, which means if the tire stops, the car doesn't. The car keeps rolling, and rolls way over. Well, Mustangs have a positive roll front suspension, which means the more it rolls, the more positive the camber goes. And a couple of things happen. You can chew up the outside of the tires pretty quickly because you're rolling over and you don't have enough negative camber, and you chew up the outside edge. And the other thing is they can surprise you at the wrong time. I've seen a number of people that thought they were smarter than me and went and got slicks and on a stock suspension, and ended up having let's see, issues and events, either sliding off track, going off track, hitting something. I mean, it's just not even when you're doing a car, everything has to work together as a system. And slick tires, part of that system is high rate springs and highly valved shocks. So I kind of got off on a tangent there, but I do that sometimes. Okay, so we got back to the last question that's going to lead into our show and tell this week. This is, again, I don't know who this is from, so if you're out there, wave your hand or something. Is the rear steer kit already set up to go, or do I have to go through the whole bump steer thing? Well, the short answer is no, you don't have to do that. But bump steer, you must be looking at somebody else's advertisements and want to sell you a bump steer kit. That's not what we have here. What we have is something to fix the roll steer. Okay. When I was doing some testing with Ford Racing and the Mustang magazines at Road Atlanta on the original FR500, which was an SN95 car with double wishbone front and IRS rear. At the last two turns at the end at the other end of the track, the same spot on the second right hand every single time the back of the car got loose. And then coming up under the bridge, the exact same thing happened. The car got loose in the exact same spot. So I'm back and I started. We'd already done a lot of work in my geometry program, on my computer, on trying to improve the roll center, the camber gain in the back, to try to see how good we can come with the OE architecture. And at that point, we really hadn't focused too much on the tie rods. And what I found is, running through the simulation, as soon as the car got to a certain degree of roll, don't ask me what it is, it's a little too long ago. Once it got to a certain degree of roll, both rear wheels turned the wrong way. So that's what I was feeling. The car would get to a certain point of roll and the back of the car would get loose because the rear wheels turned the wrong way. So what we do, this is our rear steer kit. And it is designed to improve roll steer, not bump steer. We look at bump steer on the front. The back of the car, what I'm focused on is roll steer. And it already comes. All you have to do is screw it on. It's already preset to get you to take about half of the roll steer out. Now, when we do the full IRS package, our full IRS package, and we do the geometry upgrade to the carrier, then we modify the inner pickup point, and we move this even. This is like moving it down. We move it even further down, which pretty much takes out all the rear roll steer. And we've had just taking half of it out makes a big difference. We've had some of our drag race guys, I'm not a drag racer, say that on the dyno, they could see the wheels don't want to move around as much, which means if they're on the drag strip, the wheels aren't doing this as much either. So, I mean, it's a big plus. But see, the rear steer kit is one part of our phase one for IRS Mustangs. Phase one is just like we do the IRS packages in 4 stages. So phase one is the easiest. And with that, we add one of our super heavy duty forward torque braces. The factory one, if you've ever seen one, it's kind of like this curved, it's hollow round tube, and the ends are just squished. And anything that's round is not as strong as anything that's straight. So we did this a number of years ago, and this is super heavy duty, super strong, so it doesn't move at all. And then what we do on that is we have our aluminum Diff bushings. And these are something that we did a long time ago, and a lot of people copy my stuff, and nobody's really copied these yet. And what I've done is made this out of aluminum instead of rubber or urethane, like a lot of them are. But I also made it so we can adjust the rear pinion angle. Because about 2000, I think maybe 2000. I can't remember exactly, but there was some driveline vibrations in the Cobras We had one customer that had his Cobra, the Ford dealership, like 3 or 4 times. He couldn't get the vibration out. They had changed everything. Brought to us. All we did was put a set of these in, of course, and this, and change the pinion angle. And this is a series of, this is aluminum, and it's a series of washers, big, little, big, little, big, little. Part of it is it actually works a little bit like a heat sink, that they'll help pull some of the heat out of the differential. Now for the street, it's fine. It's not going to be enough. It won't take enough heat out for track. For that, we need like a rear diff cooler. But the other thing, because we can stack these, and there's a pin inside, we originally designed it so this would sit at the bottom. The diff would sit on that, and then we'd stack the washers up on top of it. But ever since we've discovered that with the vibration, we put all the washers on the bottom, which puts the pinion angle up just a little bit, and we've never ever had an issue with driveline vibration. So I mean that's kind of like phase 1 of our IRS. It actually does a lot for traction. It does a lot for drivability, and actually helps a little bit in taking heat out. Because what we're doing is we're nailing down the front of the differential with that, no rubber, just solid, and that helps from getting the differential winding up and bouncing on the rubber, and that actually really starts to take some of the wheel hop out. There's a lot more things that influence wheel hop, but that's one of them. And between that and the rear steer kit, we start taking wheel hop out, which is pretty important for an IRS car. There's a lot of people like to hit the gas and go, and if the wheels are doing this, is not much fun. So getting back to your question, all you have to do is just stick it in, adjust your toe. You want to adjust the toe at 16th toe in at the back. That's about plus 0.25 to plus 0.3 toe in at the back on an IRS car, along with maybe 1 to 1.2 negative camber. There's a quick alignment specs for you. Okay, I think that's got me through what I started to talk about today. So now I think, do we have any questions out there?
We do have several questions that have come in. I didn't know if you wanted to answer those questions after you went through the tech portion of it, save them for the end, or do you want questions now?
That was the tech portion.
Can you put an IRS in from a 9904 Cobra into an S197 Mustang?
Yeah. That was like my second question.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Okay, yeah, so if you'd like, we can get to some questions. We do have some. So the first one, and we do have lots of comments, and there's a lot of people joining us today, so thank you very much. The first question we have comes from, not a name, DJKR. He says, what is the widest wheel tire combo possible on a Fox Mustang using your IRS and or your recommendation for road racing purposes? I have wheel tubs from drag racing days, so unsure what fits.
That's kind of like that's an open-ended question. It's been a long, long time since we've done Fox cars. But what we do to the rear carrier, we actually take that big mount out of the car, which means you can put a bigger tire in. You can go all the way to the frame rail. And I'd actually have to go back and check and see what some of our customers are running. But I would think now let me think out loud. Now on Roy's SN95, which isn't quite a Fox, I mean, we ran 315s on the back of his car without flares. When we went to 345s, we had to add flares. So I would guess 305 should be a go, but just something you're gonna have to work out. I mean, there's some formulas out there. There's actually some things you can buy. You can bolt it on the wheel, and it'll show you just how wide of a wheel you can put in there. And once you figure out how wide a wheel you can get, then you can figure out how wide of a tire. But it's, like it's been a long time since I did Fox cars. I'm sure we have some customers out there. If you call in, Rich might have a better idea, or might know one of our Fox customers that has already gone through that exercise that can help you out more than I can. So, okay, we're going to get another question.
Okay, yeah, so we do have another question from A2D Racing. Kenny, are you still interested in making an aftermarket and stronger IRS steering knuckle? Or what we call upright?
Sort of. I mean, we've taken a look at it. From an engineering standpoint, it's a real challenge. And the challenge comes in with coming up with an axle bearing that'll fit, that'll work with the stock axles. I mean, that's the biggest challenge, is that whole axle bearing thing. And making the axle housing itself is not a problem, but we don't want to drop the factory bearing back in because they're junk. I mean, if any reason to change the upright, it's going to be to get a better, like a double tapered roller bearing in there that actually takes some load. The bearings that are used in the Cobras are actually front wheel bearings from a Taurus, I think, and they're double rollers. So, I mean, they're really not, if you got roller bearings, they're really not designed to take a load. Where if you have like conical bearings, like opposing conical bearings, and that'll take all the load you want to put into it. So that's where the challenge is, and we really haven't had a chance to go back. We looked at it, I think, a couple of months ago, and we kind of got stumped at that point and have not had a chance to go look back and look at it again. It's something that we're thinking about. There's just some challenges we have to overcome to make it work.
Okay. We had a comment from Cliff Glidden about his engine, which you spoke about earlier. Basically says, Kenny's right. If you're going to spend money on a cam, then save up and do it right. My FR500S with those World Challenge mods runs great, pulls hard out of the corners where it used to lag, revs in a linear manner, and pulls all the way up to the top of the RPM curve, and it sounds terrific. So that's straight from the horse's mouth, the guy who drives the car on track every day. So those are all good comments and suggestions. So anybody who's looking at doing cams, be sure to
think about the rest of, think about the rest of the package, because that's what makes the cams work.
Yeah, and so the next one is from Carrie, who's in the gallery, and she wants to know, when does the Speed Therapy Academy start, and can I still register?
Okay, well, I'll answer the second part of it first. The answer is yes, you can still register. In fact, it starts next week, but because we've had the move thing, Carrie had some surgery, so we're kind of like way behind on recontacting people to sign up for the academy. We're going to hold the registration open for a couple more weeks, and don't worry about missing anything, because everything's recorded. So you can go back and you can watch anything that you missed. You can go back and watch the rerun. In fact, that's one of the best parts of the academy is people love to go back and re-look at the sessions I do, because they say they always go back and look and they go, oh man, how did I miss that the first time, or how did I miss that? So it's going back and reviewing it is always good. So we're going to do this up for at least the first couple of weeks. So if you want to sign up, it's an amazing experience. Strongly recommended if you really want to learn about cars, performance, how to make them work, how they work. It's 16 weeks, 2 evenings a week. All the sessions are recorded. And then every other Thursday, we have master class where we'll bring in people I know from the industry. We'll spend 20, 25 minutes talking about their area of expertise, and then open the rest of the time up for questions. And the academy is done in Zoom. So it's like everybody's there. Everybody can talk to everybody. It's a pretty cool format. And anybody that's ever taken the academy can tell you that it's well worth it. Plus, you can't see it, there's a banner in the way. You get a nifty Speed Therapy Academy polo shirt. Can you take the banner out so you can see my polo shirt? staying on my toes. There we go.
Sorry.
I took this down. So you get a Speed Therapy Academy polo shirt, and you get, when you sign up, you also get Speed Therapy Academy notebook with a whole bunch of stuff in there. There's dividers, so you can put all the different sessions in. You can make copies, make notes. There's really good material setup sheets, tire temperature sheets, and then at the end you get a nifty Speed Therapy Academy certificate of accomplishment. So if you want to be the guy at the track that shows up or autocross. In fact, we had, I think, two or three guys in the last academy that were autocross people, and they came away with a lot. I mean, because everything that we talk about for the track is applicable to autocross, but in a more condensed and slower capacity. So, yeah, I mean, if you're thinking about it, get in touch with us. We can talk to you a little more about it. But it's if you really want to learn, I mean, I go through the car front to back 16 weeks, 2 evenings a week. And then, in fact, and then after that, there's some perks to go with this. Any of the Speed Therapy Academy members or alumni get a 10% discount on all Kenny Brown products. And we had a number of people sign up for this academy that were going to buy suspensions and signed up for the academy so they could get 10% off their suspensions. Also, we have 10% off on Bear brake products. And also another perk we have is if you get your brake pads through us, we will give them to you pre-bedded for free. So, and then plus you've got like almost unlimited access to me to answer your questions, help set up your car, whatever it is. So it's an amazing program. If you're thinking about waiting to the next one, I wouldn't. I mean, I've got a pretty aggressive new product development schedule for next year. And right now it doesn't look like I'm going to be able to have the time to put into an academy in the spring because I've got a huge development sheet. So if you're thinking about putting it off till the next one, I suggest you do this one because there might not be one next spring. Like I say, I've got way too many things to do. New products up the wazoo are going to be coming out here over the next 2 years, and so I'm going to be pretty dedicated to that. So yeah, I mean, it's like my whole purpose of the academy is giving people the education so you don't have to rely on the internet or the guy down the street or the guy in the paddock. I tell people the two worst places to get information are the paddock and the internet because nobody really knows what they're talking about. But if I can help you not make one mistake that I made when I was starting out a long time ago, then all of a sudden it's worth it for me and it's worth it for you. Because mistakes cost time and money. And this actually would speed up your learning curve by years. What you would learn in the academy over the 16 weeks would take you years and years to learn if you ever learned all that much ever. So I strongly recommend it. It's going to be the last one for a while. So if you're just thinking about it, sign up. We have some payment plans. If you think, well, I'd like to do it, but I don't quite have the budget. Don't worry, we've got payment plans. We can hook you up. So I think I covered just about everything, Kerry.
Yeah, so we have a little bit of time left. We're doing pretty well. We're 50 minutes in, but I have one question or topic that I'd like to talk about just briefly. There's a lot of customers who show interest in the various different rear suspensions that you make, whether it's an IRS rear suspension or the S197 rear suspension systems that you offer. But can you talk just briefly about the importance of matching the really advanced rear suspension like you offer with the front suspension, or not mixing and matching parts? What's the importance of using your rear suspension matched with your front suspension, assuming that the geometry changing in the rear has a dramatic impact on the geometry at the front of the car?
Okay, well, let me start at the very beginning and say it's, what I talk about all the time is if you're upgrading your car, try to stick with one company, with one philosophy. Some of the worst phone calls I get are somebody, their car doesn't work, it doesn't drive right, and I start asking them what they've got, in the car, and they've got the springs from this guy, they've got the shocks from somebody else, they've got control arms here, bushings there. I mean, they've got just a mixed mash of parts from all the, it's catalog, basically catalog parts. And the problem with that, as soon as you do that, if you're not following a proven philosophy or a proven program, then what you've just done, you've initiated your own R&D program. Because you're going to find out how those different products from different manufacturers work or don't work together. And, I would say 9 times out of 10, your result is going to be marginal at best. That's why, if like you say, I'd like you to stick with my philosophy. If not me, if you like somebody else's philosophy, like stick with them. That way that you can, if you have a problem, you can call them, and depending on who it is, they may or may not be able to help you. Where if you stick with us, everything we do here is all the parts I sell are the parts I use in my cars. Okay, you don't see different products from a whole bunch of different people. Everything that's in our catalog, everything we sell, are parts that I use in the cars I build. So we have the greatest technical support there is. If you call up, you've got a problem, and we deal with these products every day. We can get you straightened out. Or if you've got like this and that from somebody else, I mean, I just can't help you. I had no idea how all that stuff would work together. So that's kind of like the first thing. But when we do, I've got a lot of people been calling lately with S197s, not knowing where to start. As far as building the suspension up, if they've got to do it on a budget or in stages, what I recommend, one of the first things you consider is the jacking rail and matrix brace. Jacking rail are almost a slam dunk no-brainer. That goes along the pinch weld, which means you can jack the car up anywhere along the pinch weld, and you can put jack stands under there, which opens up the underneath of the car. Which makes it really easy. It means you don't have to get down and crawl and kind of find a place for the jack and start jacking here and slip and go into the floor pin. So, jacking rail and the matrix brace ties together the jacking rail and the rail that runs down the center of the car with 4 triangulations, which really stiffens up the center. And, a stiff chassis is really important for handling. And we spent a whole evening on chassis in the academy. Just going through, why it's important, and just, what kind of chassis stiffening there is and how they build race cars. So that'd be the first step. But if you're doing it in stages, for 197, I recommend the rear grip kit first, because the back of the car is the worst part of the car. Anybody that's gone around the corner with an S197, GT500 especially, and you try to get to the gas too soon, the back goes. I mean, there's no controlling it. And with the rear grip kit, what that does, it changes the entire rear suspension geometry, and it really makes the car's handle. In fact, it works so good we throw the rear sway bar away, because what the rear sway bar does on a stock Mustang, we correct all that stuff with geometry, by changing the geometry. So it would be rear grip kit first, then springs and shock next, because you really need some decent springs and shocks, and then the front grip kit first. And we came out with a little while ago my advanced rear suspension system, the AGS 4.5. It's pretty remarkable, but you can't just put that on, because it won't work. It creates so much rear grip that the car has to be balanced for that, which means you have to have a front grip kit. My front grip kit with the improved front suspension geometry, which the front grip kit is, if you had a Mustang on track, one of the first things you do, you go into a corner, you turn the wheel, and you just kind of wait for it to catch so you can drive through the understeer. Well, with the front grip kit, you turn the wheel, car turns. There's no wait, no hesitation. It just turns. So it's about quick rotation. So you have to have a front grip kit to go with the enormous amount of rear grip that we generate with AGS 4.5. And also, because there's so much rear grip in AGS 4.5, we have to make a significant increase in rear spring rate just to get the car to balance. Otherwise, the car would have great turn in, and there's so much grip in the back, it would just push the nose out. But if we go way up on rear spring rate, and we balance the car, and I mean, you get fantastic turn in, and you can just drive through the middle of the corner. You don't have to wait for anything. You don't have to wait for the axle to settle. You don't have to wait for the front to grip. You just drive through the corner, power on. So I mean, that's a complete system. Everything I do is a system. Okay, there's only 3 parts of my suspension: rear grip kit, front grip kit, springs and shocks. Because I have all the pieces, all the components of the rear suspension are engineered to work with everything else. The upper control arm module is longer than factory. The pickup point's been changed. We've got the axle brackets and the change in the axle bracket and the axle bracket height and the upper control arm. That gives me the instant center that I'm looking for. Something I've developed over a lot of years that I'm pretty comfortable with. It makes the best all around. And then we look toward the panel bar at the bottom of the differential, which brings the roll center down to the bottom of the differential. So you don't have to wait as long to get back to the gas going around the corner. Even lower control arms have offset bushings, so instead of being splayed at the front, they're parallel, which means instead of the rear roll axis pointing up in the air, that it's parallel to lower control arms and goes forward. So bring the rear roll center down, the front roll center up. I mean, the cars just work. You can brake really, really late. A lot of anti-dive at the front, a lot of anti-squat at the back, which actually is traction off the corner, which in turn is also anti-lift under braking. So the back of the car doesn't want to pop up. So, I mean, it's everything that I do is a system. The rear system, the front system. And all the pieces are engineered to work collectively to get the result we're looking for. So if you go looking to shop at parts, I mean, I'd like you to pick my systems, but at the very least, if you think somebody else has a better plan, just stick with them. Because then if you have an issue, you can call them and ask them, what the problem is or how to make the car handle. So I think that's the whole, my stick with that. The stick with one proven philosophy is the way I refer to it. So.
Okay, so we really don't have any more questions. We have a comment from a couple of Academy alumni members. If you're into cars and performance, if you're a track driver, and if you're always trying to improve, then the Academy will give you the knowledge to be better. I found it well worth the money and time. That's what Cliff Glidden had to say. Brian West is in the house today. He said that he's going to see you on Wednesday, apparently, so he's looking forward to that. And that's really about it. We're 59 minutes in. Since you're probably ready to go, we had one more question, but we can hold that till next week if you'd like. That came in via email. So,
well, what was it? We might as well get it wrapped up today. And then, by the way, if you send your questions in or subjects through the society, through the Speech Therapy Society or Facebook, what you'd like me to talk about next week, because we're just kind of coming back off of the whole confusion of moving and everything, and we need to start doing some planning. But I'd like to know what you like me to talk about, because as I said before, I'll talk about what you want to learn about, because that's what I'm here for. So please send in some recommendations for subjects, or send in questions. A lot of times I'll turn questions into tech tips or other subjects. So, okay, what's the last question?
Okay, the last question was, they mentioned that you preach a lot about oil coolers for the engine in almost every application, as well as an IRS differential cooler, particularly in the S195 or Fox body IRS cars, and then also the S550. His question is, do you recommend or do you use transmission coolers?
Yes, but it depends where. For track day cars, we've never really found the need to use a transmission cooler, because you're only on track maybe 20 minutes typically. So we never put transmission or rear axle coolers for track day cars. Now, a race car, completely different story. No, absolutely. Like on World Challenge cars, we do have a transmission cooler and a rear differential cooler. You absolutely positively have to have those, because when you're hammering on these cars, flat out for an hour, 50 minutes or an hour, things get really hot. And you've got to keep them cool. So number one, you get peak performance, and secondly, you get longevity. So for track day cars, we really haven't looked at transmission coolers or rear axle coolers, unless somebody's having some real overheating issues, like you're puking fluid all over the place. But even so, like on the rear axle, live axle, there's a little knob on the top of the one of the axles. That you get a little cap on there. You can take that off and put a brass barb in there, and then put a tube on that, hose on that, wrap it a couple of times, and go into a trunk into a can, which is your overflow for your differential, because they do get hot. But typically we haven't for track day cars, absolutely for race cars. And for IRS, if you're not taking your IRS car on track, you really don't need a diff cooler. If you are going on track, you absolutely need a diff cooler, because that little differential is only this much, is aluminum, and for the most part, it's encased in rubber, and they will get hot and they will burn up. So a diff cooler for IRS on track, yes. Street, not really not needed that much. And then on the other side, you mentioned oil coolers. When we're looking at building cars, most of my cars, it's like street performance cars, I'll only do a radiator. It's like we'll address the whole engine heat in stages. And the easiest thing to do is change the radiator. We've got an outstanding radiator, our triple pass, which the water goes across the radiator 3 times for maximum cooling. Plus, we've got smaller fins. We have like 18% more surface area than any other 3-core radiator. So first, we'll start with radiator. If that takes care of the cooling issues, great. But if you're going on track and you're still seeing some elevated like oil temperatures, then we'll add an oil cooler. But any of the cars we put oil coolers on, we'll also do it with. There's a little piece we put on that mounts where the oil filter goes, that we have that plumbs off to the cooler. And I always use the thermostat ones, which means that the oil cooler does not get engaged, okay, until the oil temperature hits 180 degrees. Oil temperature hits 180 degrees, it opens up, the thermostat opens up and engages the oil cooler. If it gets below 180 degrees, it'll shut the oil cooler off. So, I look at cooling issues in stages, because I just don't do things to do things. Anytime I make a change, I'm looking for an outcome. And typically we change radiators out in all our conversion cars, just as a course of, that's what we do, because no matter what you do, increasing performance, you're going to increase BTUs. You need to pull some of that temperature out. So we'll drop a triple pass radiator in. If there's still some heating issues beyond that, we'll look at things like vented hoods, take heat out, or depending on the application, you might need an oil cooler, but again, we'll do it with a thermostat. So you're not cooling the oil before the engine's up to temperature. That's the big thing. If you're running an oil cooler without a thermostat, you're going to wait a really long time for the oil to get up to temperature. And a lot of times, if you start driving a car without the oil up to temperature, bad things can happen. So that's why we use a thermostat in our oil coolers. So I think I covered that.
Yeah, that did a good job of answering that question. So, and those are all of the questions that we have for today. So again, thank you to everybody who left a question in the comment section. Please keep the questions coming. As Kenny said, that really helps us formulate the script for the following week. And
also subject matters. If there's a certain subject you want me to talk about, send it in. I'll be happy to do what I can to answer your questions or create something interesting to listen to, hopefully. So, but well, with that, I'd like to thank everybody for showing up this morning, and welcome to our new space. Hopefully it's kind of like definitely a work in progress, and we just kind of pulled this together for this morning, so we can just kind of get back on getting Cars and Coffee going again. But look for improvements to come in coming weeks. We need to figure out how we're going to do this. It's kind of like an interesting but strange space, but nevertheless, I'm calling it a studio. And like I say, if you've got in the future, if you're a car club or coming to town and want to watch Cars and Coffee, let us know. If it's possible, we'll set you up. And Speed Therapy Academy, please, if you're just even thinking about it casually, don't wait for next year, because there probably isn't going to be one in the spring. Like I say, I've got a whole bunch of new products we're going to be coming up with. More on that in the future. But everything that's in the works is really, really cool. Of course, you'd expect that from me anyway, I think. So yeah, we'd like to get you signed up. And again, if budget's a problem, we've got a payment plan that gets it down. I think it's pretty low, like $150 a month or something like that. So don't waste this opportunity for an education that will be with you the rest of your life and be worth every penny. So with that, I think thanks for watching, and look forward to seeing you all next week. And be sure to share this with your friends. Have them join us. I mean, we need to start pulling in some more people now that we've got sort of a real place that we can work from. So please share and invite your friends. I think next week, when you come on, there's a place to click on Facebook. They can just instantly just go down and you can share it with a bunch of your friends. So, help us spread the word. It's good for us and good for you. Besides, we get more questions. The more questions we get, the more answers we get. So with that, thanks for joining, and have a good rest of your weekend. It's going to be cool but sunny this weekend here in Indianapolis. So we'll see you next week. Have a good weekend. Bye, everybody.